What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my orbital sander here and lightly hit these boards, and then I really don't want to take them all the way down. If I wanted to do that, I'd put them in my planer and take a shave off, but I'm just going to sand them lightly, and then we'll put some sort of finish on it, maybe a little polyurethane or something like that, just to kind of give it a little, brighten it up a little bit. But these are in great shape. The only thing is, I'm not certain, but what some of the places where the bolts, where the carriage bolts were in here, are a little pressed out. Looks like the bolts were got a little too tight somewhere along the line. And I might have, on some of them, I might have to cut a little disc and put in there to give it a little more heft, because I think there's a couple on this side right here that are halfway through this board. So, not sure that'll be a problem, but we'll figure that out once we get there. So let's go ahead and give it a little bit of sanding and see what that leaves us. And as I got into this, I noticed some of these holes, somebody misdrilled some holes here. You can see those two holes right there and then just below. They're too darn close together, and they kind of, then when they tightened up the carriage bolts from underneath here, it really messed it up. So what I'm going to do is I've got got my 1-inch Forstner bit here that I'm going to take, and I'm going to use a little guide. That's a 1-inch hole, put that over there so I've already done this one. And I'm going to move that over there, do the same thing on that side, and then I'm going to put 2 little 1-inch pins, dowel pins in there, and fill those holes. And then on the other side, I'm going to glue 3/8-inch dowels in the holes to fill those holes up, and then just re-drill everything. Now we'll put a little glue on this. Got my plug in. I'm just going to let the glue dry, and then I'll move over here and do the next one. But I can do this side right now while I'm at it. This one isn't quite as bad as this one. I could probably almost get by with just doing one deal right there, I think. There, after those set up, glue dries, I can just re-drill them. I'll send them off flush and just re-drill them when I get ready to put this back together. And then I can countersink back on this side again, and we'll have some nice holes rather than, I think this was probably a little bit loose actually. I don't know how they could have gotten them tight. So anyway, that'll fix that. Okay, we've got our holes repaired. You can see what I did here is I just took my Forstner bit, drilled a hole, and put a piece in there, and then I used my little guide here and drilled another one and put another one right alongside of it. So that's all filled up. We're going to take the belt sander now and sand those down flush, and you can see what I did on this side. So those 3/8 dowels. So now those holes are filled up, and we'll just go ahead and re-drill them when we're ready to put things back together. Good. And we'll get these little valves on the top here. There we go. Got those pretty well squared away. When I drill those, you won't see that because the casting will sit right on there and cover it up. So that'll be perfect. Now I'm going to start working on these legs a little bit. And just, basically they're just more dirty than anything. There's a little bit of rust and crap in here, but I'll just hit these legs with my wire wheel and try to get them as best I can, and then we'll give them a good wash with some degreaser and dry them off with some compressed air, and I think we'll be fine, and let them sit until we're ready to paint. There's just a lot of junk and dirt and crap in here, but I'm going to hit the high spot. There's a little bit of rust around in here, bottoms of these legs, etc., but overall they're not too awfully bad. So we're going to hit them a little bit and see what we have. What I've decided to do here with these holes where the carriage bolts were through and they were pretty pressed in, I cleaned them out with my Forstner bit, and I was going to find something to put in here, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. I cleaned them out with Forstner bits so they're all nice and clean because they were a little funky where the bolts had been in there for years and twisted and what have you. So where the square part of the carriage bolt fits in, they were a little loose. So I decided that I would go ahead and plug these. I drilled them out just a little bit when I cleaned them up. I thought I'd go ahead and put some plugs in there, re-drill them, and then put them all at the exact same depth on that drill press with a Forstner bit. So we'll drill out part of this that we don't need. And that way I'll have a nice firm grip on all the carriage bolts and they'll all be at the same depth. So we're going to go ahead and put these little plugs in here. I made them a little bit proud, so that once I put them in, then I can put my jig on top of it like that, and I'll be able to put that Forstner bit right there in the jig and drill them down to the proper depth. Well, all this here looks like a little bit of a mess. We've got all of our parts painted up, except for the motor. I've got the motor ready to paint, but I haven't painted it yet. And so we've got these all done. Over here, I took the boards and sanded them a little bit and put a couple coats of clear polyurethane on them. They turned out pretty well. They're not, I didn't spray them. I figured that I didn't need to be that precise with it, so I just brushed on the polyurethane, put a couple coats on. I think that's going to turn out real good. So the next step was we're going to start doing a little reassembly today. Well, we've got things pretty well put together as far as the stand is concerned. Got the legs bolted down, and the bed and the headstock casting bolted in. So the next thing we've got to do is I'll do the counter shaft, get that ready to go. Then, as I said earlier, I've got to paint the motor yet, but I made a little modification with respect to the motor mount. The way this came, this is actually, there were two ways you can put the motor on this. These came without a counter shaft, that is just a direct connection motor to the headstock. And the motor was mounted right here when that happened. This one, because it has a counter shaft, the motor is mounted on this board up here, and it hangs down and operates the counter shaft, and the counter shaft comes up here to the headstock. And this was bolted tight to this board here, the way the motor was. So what I've done is I put some longer 3/8 bolts in here, and I'm going to let the motor hang on these 3/8 bolts, so it'll give me about probably an inch of adjustment as I want, if I want to adjust the motor on the belt there and what have you. So, plus I think it should run a little better, I'm hoping. But I've got these bolts bolted in to here tight, and then I'll have some adjustment here with the base of the motor. So the next thing that we're going to do is get the counter shaft assembled, and then we'll probably be ready to put the motor in once I get that painted. And then what we've got is put the headstock together, tailstock on, and we'll be good to go. Okay, got the counter shaft on. Started to put the headstock back together here. Got a new belt, and with these you've got to put that on. I didn't put new bearings in this. These bearings seem like they're okay, and it's pretty easy to change them if they do need to be changed at some point down the pike. But for now, I just decided to let them go. They look like they were in good shape, so I think we'll be okay. So the last thing we've got to do here is put these bearing caps on. Now these bearings fit in there, they're tight, but they're fairly easy to take in and out because that's how you have to take the belt off or change the, you have to change the belt. Either that or loosen up the jack shaft. So they're pretty easy to take in and out, but they're a good snug fit. I just took a small drift punch and kept going around it and knocking them in there. So they're seated well. You can tell them when they seat because you can definitely tell the difference when your hammer wraps it and the punch hits it. It sits in that seat there. So I think we're good here. We're pretty much done with our lathe project, and this thing turned out quite well. I refinished the boards here. Those look pretty nice. I didn't sand them a lot. I put a little, sand them a bit, and put a couple coats of polyurethane on it. Got everything cleaned and painted up good, and everything's back together. I redid, so I put some new bolts in here. All the tool rests are done. We got a new, not a new, but a Jacob's chuck here for that end. All the tailstock is lined up with the headstock. Took care of that. And got everything pretty well cleaned up. All these handles, everything cleaned up real nicely. I've got the counter shaft in. I may still need to do a little tweaking on some of the belts, the tension on the belts. But other than that, I think this thing turned out real well. I haven't had a chance, I haven't turned a thing on it yet, but we'll get it set up and working on some wood turning projects soon. I also put on a 90-degree plug on this. I'll give you some close-ups of what I did here. This is the tailstock. This tailstock cleaned up real nice. Got a Jacob's chuck on it with a number 2 Morse taper going in here. I still need to find a chuck for this end. These tool rests cleaned up real nice. And down here, you can see made the adjustment for the motor here. So that works out pretty well. I was gonna put a paddle switch in here with a little bigger on-off switch rather than the original switch here, but I left that as it is, and I think it'll be fine. And the counter shaft, got all that cleaned up. The tool rest, got a 2-foot tool rest there, a 1-foot here, and a 3-inch. Still need to track down a couple face plates for either inboard or outboard turning. But I think I'm gonna have some fun with this. We'll go ahead and plug this in and see what we've got here.